We're taking Mexico.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right, well, let's kick this bad boy off. Is everybody here ready? Yeah. Looks like Shindo's ready.
I'm ready. I just had to get more set up. I got all my fucking stuff everywhere.
Castle looks ready. Castle, you ready? Yeah, all right. All right, and Castle, learn we have no fucking MLB or anything behind us today that's going to get us copyright striked.
I turned it off for you.
Hey,
I was watching.
there we go. All right. Let's kick this bad boy off. Hey, welcome back, everybody. We are here for another Give Me a Break. Today, we are talking about whether or not United States should invade Mexico, not just Texas invade Mexico for once. All right, we're going to find out what all these great people think, if we should invade them to stop the cartels or not. I'll let everybody get a brief introduction, and go ahead and tell us who you are and give us your introduction. Tyler, start us off.
Average debate enjoyer, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and all that fun stuff. I think this is kind of a case of Trump trying to redefine what U.S. politics and repercussions are. We see Trump punishing bad actors on the world stage with his foreign policy, tariffs, sanctions, things of that nature, including dropping bombs on Iran. Somewhat with a slightly stable economy, which people said it would completely destroy our economy. Gas prices would be through the roof, etc. We see Trump stopping the inflow of illegal immigrants at the border with no new border bill, no additional funding, anything like that. He just did it with the tools at his disposal by re-implementing his first administration's executive orders. We see Trump trying to balance the budget. Again, it takes 3% yearly growth for the next 10 years for his new beautiful bill to actually do that, but trying to balance the budget while also not raising taxes, something people said would also be impossible. So I think this is more just Trump unleashing the police at his disposal to redefine what police are capable of under U.S. guidance and law.
All right, Castle.
Thanks. My name is Castle. You can find me on Castle Guard YT on Twitch and Twitter, or X if you like to call it that. My position on this is relatively simple. I don't think we should be going into Mexico, starting a new war there just to get rid of the cartels. Obviously, the cartels are a problem, and they pose a threat to folks who are soliciting in the partaking of drugs in the U.S., but that's not something that we should be waging war over. Instead, as Tyler even mentioned too, there are ways that Trump can do things with countries, whether they're friends or foes, that eliminate the need for any types of boots on the ground or any types of attacks into another sovereign country. That will just escalate, and Mexico would probably not be too happy with that, and we don't want to start a larger war with them if we impose on their territory. So better ways to do it than going after the cartels in a sovereign country.
All right, thank you so much. Non-smoker.
Twitch.tv/non_smoker. Struggle Session Radio. Twitch.tv/the radio out in Stony Brook, New York. Smoker. So I mean, I don't know. I guess there's two ways for me to sort of look at the topic. The first is it even realistic? You know, Trump's, I think, definitely his second term has really been categorized by like policy claims, and in many cases, not a lot of policy action. There's lots of threats, there's lots of strong language, there's lots of boasting, there's lots of typical Trumpian rhetoric, and then as often plays out, you know, taco, right? Trump tends to pull away from doing anything too rash or too crazy. And I think Trump looks at extreme rhetoric as a negotiating tactic in and of itself. So when we talk about these sort of scenarios that sound really difficult to believe, Trump invading Mexico to take out the cartel, it sounds like something that would be in a movie. Part of me is very, very, very skeptical as to whether or not this is even a realistic thing whatsoever. It could very well just be something to, you know, as I said before, pressure Mexico, and also to kind of flood the zone of the political discourse to distract from the many, many, many things that are going against Trump right now. The war in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, the Epstein allegations. Trump has plenty of reasons to get the focus off of those things and onto something else. In terms of if it did actually play out in reality, is it a good idea? I mean, despite what Tyler is saying, like, I don't think that Trump's foreign excursions are in any way like exceptional when compared to other presidents. This is sort of the standard move of U.S. administrations of the past and the present, which is to interfere in the world's affairs and act as a global police force, which generally ends up being to our detriment and usually doesn't resolve a lot of the problems. In fact, in most parts of the world, we've actually proliferated the drug trade. See Afghanistan, see Vietnam, see Burma, etc. We also had a hand in creating a lot of the drug cartels, directly or indirectly as a matter of debate, but I don't think that there's any serious chance that we're going to do this, but if we do, I think it'll be a dramatic failure.
Great.
Hi, I'm Sadie. I'm streaming on Pentuple TV for a little bit. You can find me on X, SadieGirl216. So yeah, I do think that this rhetoric from Trump is a tactic. Also, I don't think this is something that is out of the blue or anything that should be viewed as a diversionary tactic from the administration. Going back on his website as far as 2020 or 2022 during the campaign, he had a full 4-minute video about declaring war on the Mexican cartels, declaring war on the cartels, not just the Mexican cartels. Since we're focusing on Mexico specifically, like one of two things are true here. Either the cartels are operating in Mexico as a hostile entity that has territorialized their own areas and Mexico has nothing to do with this, or they're complicit, they embolden, they enable these cartels, as kind of exemplified by them being able to hand over 26 cartel members this week. So I do believe that Mexico is culpable. I do believe that this was a campaign promise. And I think that we will see the eradication of the cartels in the next 4 to 8 years.
All right. And Shenandoah.
My name's Chairman Shenandoah. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv /Shenandoah with like 5 H's right now. I'm gonna change that shit back. And then I also got Shenandoah YT with 3 H's and then Y. I'm changing that shit back, but that's where you can find me. I think this is yet another chapter in a new move by the United States to become a neo-imperialist country. I think that Trump doesn't respect other countries' sovereignty. We see this with Greenland. We see this with Canada. We see this with pretty much almost any country that isn't Israel. I do believe the cartels should be destroyed, but I believe it can only be done with the consent of the Mexican people, and I do not believe that this consent is currently strong enough to support an invasion of Mexican territory. And I believe it would ultimately just lead to yet another forever war, which Americans are obviously not very fond of right now, and it's one of the main reasons that people even elected Trump in the first place. So, that's really it for me.
All right, yeah, that's actually interesting. The forever war concept. I've heard a couple people here, not here, but online, compare it to something like they think it would be a forever war, which I find interesting because most people talk about when they talk about Latin American immigration, they compare it to like I don't know immigration in Europe. They compare how the cultures are similar. Do most of y'all see it as something that would turn into a forever war?
Well, it's a forever
No.
war. If you think about the war on drugs, that the war on drugs has been going on for decades and decades. And this isn't even something that's just if you apply it to just Mexico, but outside of Mexico and even with our own dealings internally, domestically, the war on drugs has been going on forever. It's a failure. And I think if you were to try to break out and try to solve this with international, if some people think it's considered international warfare, I think then you're even expanding it into an even worse territory that will just make things even worse. So I think if you think about it that way, you want to do what you want to do is limit the exposure to the war on drugs and try to find ways to resolve it rather than attacking a sovereign country.
Well,
Yeah,
the war on drugs would be the policy to make drugs illegal in the United States. This would be going after the people that do human trafficking, ship drugs over, cause violence on the border, attack the police, kill their politicians 200 something plus a year, kill police in the high, like 10 times the rate they do in the United States. They're a little bit, it says a little bit more than just the war on drugs. I'd say this shit would be over in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Agree,
well,
and I don't think that under that circumstance that Mexico is respecting the sovereignty of the United States by allowing this criminal enterprise to continue to operate on their soil.
Yeah,
Just-
so
Go ahead,
I'll
go
just
for
be
it.
quick.
Go ahead,
Just to be
Yeah.
quick. Look, the only wars that end are conventional wars. by definition. So wars, the forever wars, that whole term came about, I think, mostly to refer to like Afghanistan primarily. And the reason Afghanistan never ended is because we weren't at war. We weren't engaging in a conventional war with a regular state. We were fighting a paramilitary pseudo state actor in the Taliban who we removed from power, but ended up scattered throughout the mountains for 20 years trying to locate them, destroy their munitions, destroy their networks of communication, all of that stuff, none of which fucking worked. And there's no reason for me to assume, based on that track record, that we would have any more success in Mexico. I mean, it was just said that the Mexican government has zero control over their own territory. Whether or not that's deliberate, I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious it's not deliberate. I think they would love to have control over their own territory. But given that, how would we even ensure that the cartel could conventionally surrender, that they could cooperate in some sort of treaty, that they could agree to break down their networks of communication voluntarily? And if we can't ensure that, there's no reason to assume that even if we wipe all that stuff out in 2 weeks, as Tyler said, that they couldn't just rebuild it.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing that would allow that would make cartels go away would have to be a total restructuring of the Mexican state so that Mexican state institutions could continually suppress organized crime, which is obviously a project that the United States is just not equipped for, as we've seen through the past 20, 25 some odd years. Sorry about the dog.
It's going to require total elimination of these
This
people.
isn't a paramilitary organization.
That's what it comes down to.
The largest cartel is 45,000 people. They would get rolled over. And again, you don't have to kill and arrest every single one of them. You take out their leadership. You take out the places where they make drugs. You take out the ability of coyotes to move people into. I think it's $12 billion they earn a year just on human trafficking, which is their highest source of revenue. You crush that. You crush the funding that allows them to buy off politicians. You back up the military. So something Shenandoah started with was the consensus of the Mexican people. Based on 2024 polling, 48% versus 50% wanted the U.S. troops to flat out move in. 75%, this is a 2012 poll, but the 75% of Mexicans wanted U.S. to train Mexican security forces. 2/3 wanted to prove the U.S. to give financial and weapon support to Mexican forces to battle the cartel. Most of the country is against the cartel and wants them out, and those numbers are only growing as their violent crime rate just completely separates from the United States.
So Tyler, if I could answer you directly, and I'm sorry to cut off everybody else, but did you know that the Taliban in 2017 was only 60,000 people? You just said that the largest cartel was, 45,000 people? If 60,000 people in Afghanistan can give the United States a run for its money, I mean, I don't know how many possible hundreds of thousands of cartel members there might be across all the different cartels. And again, it's not even one cartel. You're not just talking about fighting one Taliban. You're talking Sinaloa and
60,000 people was after 15 years of the United States destroying them.
The
war started in 2004.
Yeah, but throughout the Afghan war, the numbers were in the tens of thousands. So yeah, I mean, what he's trying to say is that once again, if you go by the track record of just the Afghan war, it sort of plays out that these relatively small networks of people in terms of numbers can still coordinate and still maintain some sort of presence in the region, such that when we pull out, which we can't be there forever if you guys don't want a forever war, you guys think it'll be over in 2 weeks. Well, if we pull out within 2 weeks, they'll just rebuild everything that we destroy in that time, even with a few thousand, tens of thousands of members. Plus, look, cartels, I mean, you're saying kill all the members, and yeah, if we could line up all the members and just shoot them, great. Don't you think that the Mexican government, someone else would have, even their rivals would have thought of that already? There's a huge problem in identifying these people, because it's not like everybody who comes forward and says, I'm a member of the cartel, I'm an armed soldier in their defense, and we just kill them. There are people who are back and forth, or informants, they work with them, they don't work with them, they're in the Mexican government, they're not, they're this, they're that. It's sort of all over the place.
I want to speak to kind of what both sides brought up here. I think this is actually interesting because I live here on the border, and we have problems with multiple cartels, right? They fight each other all the time, right? There's not one like segment, right? Like the Zetas used to be Mexican Special Forces, and then we have like the ones that are the original Sinaloa cartel. They have a lot of guys that are the actual PRI secret police still in the higher ups, and they still have like I think they're all like in the 40s now, but they're all still like the former secret police. You know, they have like cartels that are entrenched with government in different regions, like Sinaloa. Their governor's basically always been a cartel member. You know, I do find it interesting. I don't know that it's the exact same as Afghanistan because there are all these different groups. Versus like the Taliban, yeah, there was one group, there was warlords. However, like these groups definitely don't like each other. It's not like there's a unified, hey, get the U.S. out like there would be. I don't know that this would unify them in the same manner. Do y'all think that it would unify them all, or would they still be competing with each other? You know, how is this going to go down?
I think that a targeted enough attack is going to scare the rest of the people into the holes that they came from. It's going to dissolve on its own if one portion of it takes a hard enough hit from the U.S. military.
Yeah, can I just point something out about the Zetas real quick? So the Zetas were partially formed out of, yes, Mexican special forces, but they were also formed out of Guatemalan special forces. The Caibiles, I think it's pronounced. The Caibiles were trained by the United States and Israel. And the reason they were trained was because we hoped the Caibiles would help fight narco traffickers. So, in other words, what happens when we interfere in these regions is that we claim to be fighting narco-terrorism in this one area, so we train this other group, or we attack this place, or we do this thing, and then it ends up playing out that we've created another monster altogether. So to your point, Gibbs, or to answer your question, I don't think they're all going to unify against us because all the cartels have their own interests. They all have the different leadership, they care about making money, and so forth. It would benefit, for example, the Sinaloa cartel or whatever the remnants are of that, if we took out the Zetas or we took out some other organization. So I'm sure they would work with us. And that's actually how this is, kind of borne out in the region, is that the groups that will work with us, we pay them, we train them, we arm them, and then they continue the drug trade. So it's sort of a self-defeating,
There is some of that. He's not 100% wrong there. There is definitely some of that. We always arm the rebels, and the rebels step into the power vacuum. But at that point, you're continuing the fight. You're knocking it down. Look at Hamas right now. That's on their 8th string of leadership. They don't know who the fuck is in charge at this point, and neither do we, because mostly everybody worth a shit is dead. So you can start, knocking them down, and pretty soon you get to the JV squad. But you're never gonna fully you're never gonna fully be able to get rid of crime with laws. So the opposition to the drug war, I would say, is a little bit like saying, well, we haven't gotten rid of murder, so murder laws aren't working. What the United States military can do from 30,000 feet, where they're completely untouchable by anything the cartel has access to in terms of weaponry, is completely destroy them without losing a single U.S. troop. All drones, unmanned and manned aircraft, bombs dropped from 30,000 feet, there's just nothing. They're completely at our mercy. Because unlike the Taliban, who was over 200,000 strong at their peak when we attacked them, the largest cartel is 40,000 people. They don't have anti-air missiles. They don't have the national backing. They don't have that funding to fight the United States government. They would topple in a matter of a couple of weeks. And again, we wouldn't get them all. We would just put a big dent in it. You're never going to win that fight. That's the reason we have a DEA in the first place, is because drugs are not going to stop. The demand's never going to stop from the United States side. But we can slow this down substantially just by dropping some well-placed bombs and some.
Well, Tyler, you say that, but overall, just Mexican cartels, and we're not even talking about the ties to other countries like Guatemala. Just Mexico has 175,000 people in cartels estimated, right? And the scary thing, like with Sinaloa and the Jalisco, New Gen, right? They both have about 45,000, but most of those members aren't necessarily in Mexico. A lot of those people are here. So and the reason I brought up the Zetas originally is, yeah, Sinaloa, if they get attacked directly by the U.S. military, they're probably going to fight back by fighting against military, right? The Zetas, they're going to go and open up on schools, right? They're going to be like, no, we don't care. We're going to fight more deadly. They're going to do similar to, what's the cartel fucking down in MS-13? No, that's not what it. Tren de Agua. They're going to be much more violent, right? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, they're going to go and be attacking like soft targets because they're going to be like, well, if we just bleed them and the public what gives up, we know that works for Afghanistan. Why wouldn't it work with us when we're right here? What do you have to say to something like that, Tyler? Whenever like these people, how do you fight a group that's going to be already in our country?
El Salvador figured out a way to curb almost all the gang violence and make their murder rate plummet, and they're a tiny nation by comparison to the United States.
They did it domestically. They didn't need our help to do that.
Well,
That's why if you want to train El Salvador and give their military money, similarly with Mexico, if you want them to stop their own domestic disputes with the cartels, then have them train their own military. But we shouldn't be doing that ourselves and wasting taxpayer money to fight somebody else's drug war.
About sovereignty. Gibbs is asking about like just their ability to do so. I'm saying.
Yeah, but I think to your point, though, their ability to address the issue was done, you could arguably, without human rights in purview, but it was done in El Salvador to crack down on crime. So I think to your point, it can be done.
Mexico
I just think that they've done it on their own.
You're right. Mexico doesn't have the will. We had to threaten them with tariffs on multiple instances just to get them to do anything about the cartel. They sent us about 50 cartel leaders and members, and that's about it. They had to be forced. Because either they're being coerced with violence in their nation, because again, 200 plus, I think it was 2021 was the peak year, 260 politicians were executed. I have it somewhere here in my notes. I don't know exactly. 170 in 2023. Politicians and their family members.
Just to Tyler's point, though, real quick, I like I said, I brought Sinaloa, right, because in some cases they are the government. Like it's not like the government doesn't have the will. In some cases, they are the government. Like in certain regions of that country. So like you would be fighting a quasi-government that's more akin to ISIS than it is to like some of these other things are more akin to the Taliban in some regards, where they actually have governmental control in certain regions and are tangentially supported.
I just meant they didn't have the nationwide government support. I was saying that they don't have access to anti-aircraft missiles. They couldn't do a fucking thing about us 30,000 feet in the air dropping bombs.
Why do you think they don't have? Why do you think they don't have anti-aircraft missiles? They shut down helicopters that we had before.
Yeah, but
there is evidence that the Sinaloa cartel has Stinger missiles.
They also have built tanks. Like they have
their own. All of this makes me question the argument that Mexico is like sovereign at this point. Like all of these arguments make me question whether or not we're even dealing with a sovereign nation at this point, if this is how bad it is.
I think that's valid. I think a really good argument could be made Mexico is not sovereign. But I also think like it doesn't necessarily mean like interventionism will resolve that. What that would mean is that we have sovereignty over Mexico, and that also means we inherit all of their problems for however long we want to be over there. But I do want to back up Tyler a little bit. I actually don't think that there's like even a remote comparison between the technological capabilities of the U.S. military and the cartels, even if the cartels have drones, anti-aircraft missiles, tanks, whatever. For sure, we have air superiority, we have communications, intelligence, we have the edge on them in every possible way. I just think that we had that same advantage against the Taliban. We had that same advantage against lots of these little... I mean, look at the Houthis. We have the same advantages over the Houthis, and we've been carrying out, at this point, thousands of strikes against them. And there's been pretty much no effect because they're highly mobile. They're difficult to, keep in one place as a result of that. So you can't exactly take out like a base or something or a garrison or whatever, or a launch pad even. They do these quick run and gun attacks and then vanish into the mountains. And the cartels, if we force them into a position where they hide in the jungles or the deserts or wherever they would go, I just don't think that all of the air superiority, technological superiority will really matter. And I mean, I do want to bring up, like Tyler mentioned before, Hamas, which is fair. Hamas has been seriously degraded. There's very little left in terms of a military, capability. But then again, look at ISIS. ISIS was wiped out completely. And now you have, ISIS-K in Central Asia. You have ISIS, whatever, I forget the acronym, in West Africa. You have all these little ISIS cells forming everywhere else. The president of Syria was in fucking ISIS, they don't go away, you know what I mean? It's not like you can really totally liquidate them because they don't operate like a regular state,
Well, I also...
Can I interject just for a second?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that we are all pretty much in agreement that the reason that the cartels are so strong is that Mexico is a failed state that doesn't have any institutions of its own that are functioning. And going back to the El Salvador example, it's not just that they did it domestically, but they did it domestically in a way that the El Salvadorian government could continue perpetuating those institutions. They can continue suppressing organized crime into the future. If we invade Mexico and let's say we can just somehow kill every single individual cartel member, there's still going to be organized crime the second we leave. Because if Mexico doesn't have its own institutions, in order to suppress that organized crime, it's basically just going to go right back to square one with a bunch of new people now filling the power vacuum.
Well, I want to speak to kind of what also Tyler said here. You said they don't have any weapons, and I've been thinking about it. Well, the Zetas literally were the Mexican Special Forces, along with what Nonsberger said with the Guatemalans. However, we do know that based off our interactions in Colombia, and we know that Mexico has this ability too. The cartels do. Some of the military is just going to straight up like, oh, this is a fight. We're going to just team up with the cartel. Like, they'll literally have Mexican brigades working for them directly, right? And so when you're saying they don't have any military units, Mexico's got a bigger, stronger military, or bigger, I don't know if stronger, but their military is bigger than Canada's, right? Like, they could pack a punch if they wanted to, right? They have some experience sending troops overseas to like fight with people. They have the kind of like the training. They have they've sent people here to like work with us on natural disaster relief. Do we think Mexico's official government will get involved? Like, what do we do? Are we going to have an international incident when, like, oh, a brigade of Mexican troops attacks the U.S. troops? Like, what is that a likelihood? What do we think is going to happen here with something like that? Like, is Mexico going to let us do what we want in their own territory?
I mean, I don't see why that's impossible. If 50% of the Mexican people are saying that, yeah, this would be an imperialist action by the United States government, then, yeah, I wouldn't be totally surprised if at least some of the Mexican military isn't happy about it, or if some of the Mexican people themselves start supporting the cartels, believing that America's just trying to steal more territory like we did 100 years ago. I could totally see something like that happening. Why not?
Mexico's army currently does not have operating fighter jets. Now, Gibbs, can you tell me your point about super carriers again real quick? How many nations in the world have super carriers?
Yeah, I mean, also, well, here's a big one. How many nations have borders with the U.S. that are directly attached to us?
That's why that makes it much more paramount. If they're pumping in enough to get $12 billion out of just illegally transporting people, again, a third of them were unaccompanied children over the border, I think that alone makes it worth it to stop them. Mexico's sovereignty, let's say Mexico cannot sign on to any U.S. action publicly under threat of death. I guarantee there will be some sort of backdoor deal between Sheinbaum and Trump that we don't get to hear about for a few years until her life is safe, if it actually does happen. I don't think there'll be a lack of sovereignty on the part of the United States just because there's no way. Like, there's no way we go in without her approval, at least on the back door. We just won't know about it right away. These people are under threat of death if they go against the cartel too hard. And Mexico is actually taking some action against them in certain regions. They're just not having that much success, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, okay, so I think this is insanely unlikely. We're like way past the point of like realistic, but let's just for fun, like Mexico declares war on the United States, right? Like we say we're going in to fight the cartels. Mexico says, God damn it, we won't tolerate that. We're declaring war on you. Let's do it. I agree with Tyler. We're going to wipe out the Mexican army like within probably weeks, and Mexico will surrender. It'll be a conventional military scenario where that government surrenders. What happens then? Right? What happens then? Like I tried to say this before, but then we're kind of in a position where we inherited a bigger problem. Because now we're sort of in charge of either saying, okay, Mexico, well, you have to sign a treaty with us where you do this, 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 and this, and this. One of those things being wiping out the cartels, and Mexico will be like, okay, you got it. Only problem is we're not capable of doing that. That was the fucking problem to begin with. Or it could be a scenario where we say, oh, well, we'll install new political leadership and we'll build infrastructure over there. We'll train your military. We'll do this and that and the other to get you to a point where you can take out the cartels. And then that becomes this never-ending money flow thing with limited success where we find out the cartels are stealing weapons from the Mexican military and so on and so forth. It'll be a disaster just like every other incursion into Latin America or Central America or what have you. So, yes, we could easily beat Mexico, but I don't think that resolves the problem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead. Anybody thoughts on that? I mean, what is the solution to the problem if it's not invade and take out the cartels?
I don't want to keep filibustering, but I have an answer for that. There is a middle ground of you just push back the cartel and let Mexico's government kind of parse it out itself. Eventually, when the corrupt people are unable to receive cartel money, they may not have the same campaigns that they did previously, or maybe we get to see investigations into that. I would say we don't have to completely take over their government. We just kind of go in there, depower the cartels significantly, maybe not destroy them. Maybe we'll have to mow the lawn every 10 years or something like that, but at least push them back to the point where Mexico can get its bearings back and regain control of some of its public institutions.
I think that's a significantly more reasonable solution, actually. I mean, it would still require the consent of the Mexican government to mow the lawn, as you said, but yeah, I'd actually just be fine with that.
Why do y'all think that's even possible? I guess is what I'm asking. I don't. Why don't you think it's possible, Sadie? Yeah.
I believe that it needs to be a full scale ground invasion. We've been talking about things like the Houthis, the Taliban, all these different groups that we have declared war on directly from the other side of the world. I don't think that you can really compare the threat level, the risk level with those groups. This is our southern border. This is people that are operating within our territory, and it has to be an invasion, I believe, unfortunately. And it does have to be rooting it out from the ground up. And I don't know if it needs to continue beyond Mexico. I do think that would be enough to shatter this entire criminal organization to the wind. But we are talking about an organization with stable income that controls territories, that has GDP that's larger than some countries. This is not a street gang, and that's what I feel like people refer to it as, is a Crips or Bloods type of thing, or even the mafia. It's not. These people don't have code of ethics or honor or anything like that. They kill kids, they kill women, and they don't give a shit. So if we just pretend oh, well, there's nothing we can do in the sovereignty and the this and the that. I'm 42 years old. This is something that's blown up in my lifetime. There were cartels when I was born. This is a whole different world that we're talking about today, and it needs to stop, or else it's just going to continue to fester and grow.
I just want to say that I agree that the Taliban and Houthis never presented a threat to us. That's I totally agree. As a tanky,
I agree with you too.
as a tanky, that's why I argue all the interventionism is always bullshit. It's always
I agree with you too. I'm very much an isolationist. This is one situation though. This is happening and is a threat to our homeland, and we have to do something about this.
Right. So okay. So let me try to counter this way. I would say this. Has the cartel ever presented a national security threat to the United States, in a traditional sense of the term? We know that they help bring drugs over here. We know that they're partially responsible for gang violence, definitely gang violence within prisons. They're tied into that and all that kind of stuff. But have they really presented a true national security threat to the United States in the same way that Al-Qaeda or a terrorist organization has?
The only way that I can say that they have is by the interference of our own intelligence communities and bolstering the spread of this criminal enterprise and organization, the corruption within our own government that has bolstered these organizations. Yeah, that's what I would say where the national security threat comes from. I know it's kind of a back end view of it, but the way you're probably asking it, no.
Yeah, and look,
yes. The answer is yes. I'll answer that. We have evidence of them importing spies from Iran and China. We know China's got a direct relationship with some of the cartels. That's part of the reason why they fund the fentanyl and they provide them with the chemicals to ship here. That's a direct intervention by a foreign power. Some cartels work with us against foreign powers. We've had them turn over Muslim terrorists from like Saudi Arabia, I believe, right after 9/11. However, there's evidence that they've supported, like moved lots of people in from other countries that could be spies and terror subjects. I mean, and there's even been at one point, I remember in the early 2000s, I don't know if y'all remember this, but we were talking about putting nuclear detectors on the border because we were worried that they were going to try to ship a nuclear bomb in case anything ever went down. Like, that was a big deal back.
There was also the report by the FBI, I think in January or February, that said that Tren de Agua did have ties with the Venezuelan government, and the Venezuelan government could activate members inside the United States to cause chaos or do political assassinations as well. I don't know.
Okay, so look, let me push back in like a gentle way. So if I'm going to like indulge that all of that's definitely true, and to me that actually sounds like the trying to sort of manufacture consent for a war with Iran or China more than it does the cartels. It sounds like China and Iran are the threat there, not the cartels. The cartels are just a way through which those countries can gather intelligence on us. But be that as it may, like, even if I'm going to say, okay, all of that's true and they're a problem for that reason, is it such a problem that it warrants direct military intervention? Because, I mean, there's so many things you could point to in the world, and I hate to do this game of like, yeah, whataboutism, but, like, look at Qatar, right? Qatar funds Hamas. So in theory, Qatar funds a group that carries out terrorist attacks on one of our strongest allies. And in theory, some of the money that Qatar or, I don't know, the other Arab Gulf states have spent that has gone to Al-Qaeda is partially responsible for 9/11. Well, should we then go to war with Qatar? Should we go to war with all the Gulf Arab states and neutralize any possible threat of terrorism? I mean, I think all of you guys would probably say that's not a great idea, or at the very least, it wouldn't really resolve the problem. I think, yeah, if you wipe out the cartels, Iranian Chinese spies would probably find another way to get into America. I would say no. They've never carried out like a terrorist attack or killed Americans in mass or anything like that. They don't present a threat in that sense.
Killed DEA agents in Mexico. I mean, I feel like you're
in Mexico
wiping that away, though. Like, oh, well, any venue could exist. Well, this is the one that does to import these spies, and they have the network to do it that's organized and it works, So that's kind of just like sweeping it under the rug. Like, oh, well, it's really Iran and China, and like that venue exists because of the cartels right now. Sure, another one might, but this is the one that does.
Well, okay, that's fair. And I don't mean to totally brush it aside completely, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, what is the level of the threat versus the potential level of force we'll have to utilize to do something about it? And does it warrant that? And I would say it doesn't warrant that. Just given the level of threat presented right now. What I really wanted to get to, though, and I maybe going in a totally different direction here, is like, if we really want to weaken the cartel, why don't we focus on all of the things that we can do domestically? Like, this is where in an area where I probably agree with a lot of MAGA. Why don't we strengthen the border? Why don't we clean up our cities? And then here's somewhere where there may be a departure from MAGA, but I don't know, hear me out here. Why don't we do something about like drug addiction, homelessness that actually addresses like the problem, like something about the economic inequality here, people's feelings of hopelessness, their inability to get access to quality mental health care, like all of that stuff, reopen psychiatric institutions, all of that would probably dramatically cut down the flow of drugs into America and seriously hurt the cartel without us having to do anything.
100%. You'd be happy to know that the Trump administration is doing all of those things. We're reopening the asylums, and we just signed the bill for homelessness. I
don't know if we're reopening the asylums.
There's a difference,
That's the executive order.
Between old drugs and new drugs. So far be it for a drug dealer to actually care about the consumer itself and the protections for a consumer. But fentanyl is drastically worse than just regular heroin. As somebody that's, did it for 20 years, I can tell you that regular heroin, like to overdose on it, you have to get something that's spiked or a bad batch. Fentanyl, you're dealing with drops on an entire batch. One extra drop can kill 200 people.
Tyler, are you in recovery?
No, I just did it for fun.
Oh, okay.
I never got addicted. I just partied hardy.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, but so the problem is that more people are dying at higher rates because of the current drugs that are coming over. If this had stayed with like, just brown tar heroin and the regular OD rates, I don't think we'd hear politicians talking about it. It's because overdose rates went through the roof. And then we see fentanyl. I know a dude that died in New York. I can tell you 30 people that have died where I grew up. One of them died. He did a single line of coke on New Year's. It had fentanyl in it too much. He died from a single line of coke. So like things like that, people taking pills, fake Roxys and things like that. You get a Roxy 20, it crushes weird. You don't really care that much. You sniff it. It ends up being a fake pill with fentanyl in it, and you die. Fentanyl dope. It doesn't give you the same high. It's not as fun. You can do way less before you start to get sick. And it's just a bad overall feeling. One mistake from your cartel, it's like what they used to say about ecstasy. Somebody's cooking it up in their toilet, and one mistake can kill you. This shit actually has that potential. And the spike in overdoses is why we care so much right now.
If I can go
does
back
that mean... Oh, sorry,
a little
go on,
bit.
go on.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, it's all right. No worries, I understand. I mean, it's a panel, you want to talk, right? If I can go back to what Sadie was saying. Sadie, I feel like the shiny head gentleman and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your name. We're talking about, I suppose, what would happen after we invaded and crushed the cartels. And I feel like you just keep saying, okay, we can destroy them. And then there's not really any afterthought about what would happen.
Oh, yes.
Going forward. So like, I am curious about like what,
yes.
Even, yeah.
I'm a manifest destiny type of person, so I do believe that North America should be America. So I believe, like, going further than this intervention, I do believe that Mexico is a failed state, and I do believe that it should be under the purview of the U.S. And the other part of my plan, too, would be to hang the traitors that are responsible in the U.S. government for emboldening the cartel to what it is today. So
just to
that
be
would
clear,
be my full plan.
You want to do like fucking 1850s colonialism in like 2025 on the Mexican people? Like
No, I think that it should be a U.S. territory, though. Like, make the most organized government prevail. And Mexico's government has shown themselves, especially within the last 25 years, to not be able to keep their population safe. And we are their best option at this point. I think it's better for the Mexican people to have a stable government overseeing them than whatever the fuck has been happening over there.
Well, shit.
I don't mean to be rude, but I think that's kind of crazy. I think.
Well, Shenandoah, hold on. Well, you say it's kind of crazy, Shin, but if we actually look at, all right, so we have seen here in the U.S., since ISIS started doing stuff, we've seen people say we're on stolen land, that we need to give it back to Mexico, we need to revoke the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So I asked a couple of lawyers recently, and I looked this up after I saw this as a meme. Do y'all know what would happen if we revoked the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo? We would own all the land up to Mexico City. Like, that's what we would own. Like, I don't know that we're going back. In fact, we played nice in the 1850s, right? Like, by, signing that treaty in the first place. If we, decided we're going to revoke it and just go back to that, Russia's already doing it with Ukraine. Why couldn't we do that now?
Well, how's that working for Russia?
Yeah, exactly. Russia has a lot of consequences for its imperialist actions. It's like the country's kind of like on a teetering on economic collapse. It's been blacklisted by a bunch of other countries.
Do you think that do you think Ukraine's got the power to? Do you think that Mexico's got the power to do that like Ukraine has?
No, but I'm just saying if you're going to use the analogy,
Right, yeah, and it's certainly not going to come without consequences. I mean, if we're talking about a temporary invasion to kill the cartels turning into a forever war, turning Mexico into a literal territory would probably unite the Mexican people against us and would actually turn into a forever war. Like, on the level of Taliban shit you've never seen before. I mean, white boys would be coming home, like, sawed off in half by the cartels. It would be ugly. It would be fucking ugly. And the Mexican people would be supporting that.
Aren't you just admitting, though, that there's, like, a very serious issue beyond control currently happening then?
Well, just to be clear, I'm saying that you
the solution there. Like, how do you make sure the solution sticks? You're right.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm saying that that's an even more that's a less sustainable solution than even a temporary intervention, because that would most likely end up just pretty much in like an anti-colonial resistance movement by the Mexican people, and which would cause them to fuse with the cartels.
Well,
it would be terrible.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, just real quick, to their point, it feels like the cartels are baked in, like, at this point, right? Like, I know you're sitting there advocating invade culture change, Sadie, but if we look at history, it seems like they've had a corruption problem since the Spanish left. I don't know that even if we invade, that's going to change in that region. Like, how do you change a culture?
They probably should have I mean, they should have kept it within their region. Like, that's the only answer that I have to that. Unfortunately, it's affecting the homeland. We're talking, there was just a nightclub in South Carolina that was busted, 87 cartel members, sex trafficking, the whole deal. It's happening here. And if we just continue to be like, oh, well, I don't know, it's Mexico's sovereign territory, what's going to happen in the next 25 years?
Well,
And I
just to
do
be clear,
believe that policy like strengthening our border and stuff like that will stem it, but I don't think it's going to stop it at this point, especially when you're talking about an organized crime outfit that has GDPs that are higher than countries.
just to be clear, I
Well
do want
funded.
the cartels to go. I just think your proposed solution is absolutely going to make it worse. Like, you're just going to cause the cartels to ally with the Mexican people in an anti-colonial war against the United States. You
Somebody
would see
said-
like car bombings in DC from like cartel people. It'd be insane. It would actually end really, really badly.
Somebody said
What
they had a
is the other-
question.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Sadie because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but earlier you said that you didn't support the war in Afghanistan or us
No.
going to war in Afghanistan.
No.
Or you did?
No.
You did support
No.
it.
No, I did not support it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. But like in this case, you don't mind us invading Mexico, but
Unfortunately, it's like, yeah, our homeland. Like, it's right here. It's our southern
but like
border.
Mexico didn't have terrorists fly a plane into our buildings, so it made more sense for us to go to Afghanistan than it would.
They're killing
to
100,000
invade
people
Mexico.
a year now for fentanyl overdose deaths. It's a different war. It looks different. It's not the same, but it's still a war.
But it's not direct killing. Like you know that people are choosing to take fentanyl.
Yeah, and it's not direct like human sex trafficking then either, right? Like,
What
the
do you
human
mean?
sex trafficking trade is going to overpass the drug trade. I think it already has in like how lucrative it is. This is our like closest neighbor that is engaging in this practice.
But like,
Just to be-
shouldn't we decrease the amount of drug use domestically first?
Yeah,
maybe?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
To I think NS's point, kind of use those programs here and spend money here to kind of get that under control. I mean, if you look at the second most usage of fentanyl or fentanyl deaths in the world, it's surprisingly, and I didn't know this before I researched it, was the UK, which is 3,000 miles away. So it's not even sharing a border with Mexico, and it still has its own crisis, but they're not talking about invading Mexico anytime soon. I think they know domestically it's an issue there and it's something they need to take care of. And I think from an invasion standpoint, you have to try to figure things out at home, I would think, before you start to look elsewhere. But that's just me.
Sure, but I mean, then you're also overlooking like the kidnapping, the human sex trafficking that I'm talking about, like the arms running, all of that kind of stuff too. It's not just drugs. And yeah, I do
Definitely.
believe that we need to absolutely like clean up addiction and give more resources and stuff like that. Like been in recovery, I guess too.
Definitely agree. I think the guns.
It touches everybody's lives. And again, this is something that was started by the pharmaceutical companies here in the United States that's now perpetuated by the drug cartel. So like in everything that I'm talking about, I'm taking full culpability for the United States role in this. It's just desperate times are calling for desperate measures at this point. We have to stop pretending like these things aren't happening, especially to U.S. citizens. Like Gibbs, like I'm sure has told the story plenty of times, but like business has been affected by things that are happening at the border, and all of these are directly related to the cartel. And we can't pretend that that's not happening.
Can I ask you a hypothetical?
Sure.
So as we know, a lot of organized crime and sex trafficking and let's say illegal smuggling of firearms crosses our northern border as well up towards Canada.
Yes.
And I suppose it's quite bad. I mean, there's a lot of gangs that operate cross-border, right? Like the Hells Angels have almost completely taken over Vancouver, British Columbia. Lots of people get sex trafficked up there, et cetera, et cetera. If the Canadians had the capacity, which I know they don't, but hypothetically speaking, let's say they did, why should they not then just invade the United States being like, well, you should have contained your own sex trafficking problems and your own gun smuggling problems and your own gang problems instead of bringing it into our country, and now we have a casus belli to invade you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And again, that I do believe that our own corrupt government has been facilitating the movement of these cartels through our country up to Canada so they can establish themselves there too. And that's a great question. I do think that we are susceptible from like doing major damage in these other countries too. Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't be surprised like for other countries to mount military intervention on us because of it. So it's really like a rush to who's going to get there first, and it's going to have to be us. And this is a dirty game, and I don't like it, but it's just the truth.
So are you just saying you'd be okay with it? Like, if it did happen and they like invaded New York, you'd just be like, I guess it's okay because we deserve it?
I would definitely not be, but I would be like, man, I guess just like 9/11, I wasn't sitting on the couch like, oh my gosh, how could this have happened? I was sitting on the couch like, this is our behavior on the world stage that's led us to this point.
Right. And I suppose the Mexican people would probably feel a similar way. They might not necessarily be like our behavior, has led us to a similar point, but they'd probably feel almost about as enraged as if, Canada developed a nuclear weapon and lobbed it at DC just because, we're smuggling shit up there, right? Mm-hmm. And I suppose, doesn't the voice of the Mexican people matter at all? Doesn't the opinion of the Mexican people matter at all?
Well, Tyler's quoting them. Tyler's quoting the voice. We're already at 50%. We're at half right now.
That wants 46%. 50% was the against.
48%, 50.
48 to 50 against.
Oh, 48 to 50.
I'm giving myself 2%. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I stole 2% from you. But I don't think that's like a resounding yes. And even then, I think when the rubber hits the pavement, you're ultimately going to see that support go way, way down, especially if it entails a literal invasion of Mexico. I mean, I would highly doubt the Mexican people are going to be supporting annexation of their country by the United States. They might support a U.S.-led intervention against the cartels, maybe half of them, maybe, that might hold up depending on if it actually happened or not. But I highly doubt the Mexican people would tolerate the United States just coming in and taking over the show.
Well, fortunately for you, I'm not the president, and you asked me what my end game would be. So that's my end game. I'm not saying that you're not wrong in certain respects. I just think, too, that the U.S. military would behave very differently in a threat that actually affects our homeland than they have across the world for the last 25 years. I do think that it would be something that's over quickly. I do think that it is an enterprise based on illegal activity, and the harder that we make it for this illegal activity to happen, the less chance that there is. And that's why I do think like it only has to be like a small tactical thing to begin with, but an invasion to at least eliminate what's happening in Mexico. So the people in Ecuador, El Salvador, Venezuela, all these other places take note. And I do think that's what's going to stop this. But I think we have to take care of the people right to the south first.
But that's never how. So that would mean, why has that not been the case in Mexico then? Why has that not been the case anywhere in Central or Latin America, given the fact that the U.S. has consistently interfered there in the last 100 years? Consistently. It hasn't dissuaded the drug trade. It hasn't caused any of these little paramilitary narco-terrorist groups to stop selling drugs, to stop gathering weapons, to stop participating in sex trafficking. Our foreign policy with the war on drugs, that component of it has failed. It's actually led to more drugs being imported into America. So, I don't know. I do want to bring something up. Like, this is a random example, but I thought of it while you guys were talking. Look at China, right? China, and there's certainly drug users in China, and there's certainly homelessness in China, but drug use it's nowhere, at least if we're going by the statistics that we have, it's nowhere near the rate of a problem in China than it is in America. It's a massive, massive, massive problem in America. It's a problem in China, but nowhere near that level. China shares a border with Afghanistan. Afghanistan was the world's leading opium and heroin producer for pretty much decades, right? Yet, they don't have anywhere near the level of problem that we do. Why is that? It's because they handle the whole issue a lot differently than we do domestically. There's a lot of reasons to it. It's like cultural differences. I think drug use really flourishes mostly in the first world because people have all their basic needs met, they're bored, whatever, they go and do drugs. But be that as it may, I think if you look at the example of China, there's at least one one place where you could say the government tries to handle the problem domestically first and foremost, and they have more success doing that than they do. It's not like China's in a rush to invade Afghanistan, or any other country that borders them that deals in drugs or allows narco-terrorism to exist. What do you think about that?
Wait, are you saying China doesn't have a drug problem?
I'm not saying they don't have a drug problem. I'm saying they have nowhere near the drug problem that we do, despite sharing a border with the world's leading heroin producer.
Do you just for funsies here? Okay, you bring up the Taliban, right? But you would agree that what China's doing, where they're providing fentanyl directly to the cartels and providing the chemicals to make fentanyl directly to the cartels, is different than like what we're doing with China. We don't have like, I don't know. I actually talked to Charlie about this. We don't have like a NGO set up to like fund cartels in Vietnam to ship fentanyl into China. Like,
we did that. No, we did that actually when the Kuomintang lost the civil war to the PRC in China, to the communists. One of the first places they retreated to was Burma. And in Burma, they made all their money selling heroin. And we actually helped support the drug trade there. We gave guns to the KMT. We gave guns to the cartels that ran heroin down there. We actually transported drugs on, I forget the name of the, God, I can't remember the name of the airplane agency that we employed over there, but it was with the CIA. They helped fly guns and drugs in and out of Burma to support the KMT to fight the Chinese. We did that very exact thing. And what happened was eventually the KMT's networks were all destroyed and degraded by the Chinese. They retreated from Burma, and then they, really established themselves in Taiwan. And we gave up that program because it wasn't working. But yeah, I actually don't think China has to do anything, like, just to push back a little bit. I don't think China has to do anything to exacerbate the drug problem in America. Like, whether or not they're giving the cartels the precursor chemicals or not, the cartels are going to find one way or another to develop that stuff because they know there's a massive fucking market in America. And there's a massive market in America because we're not doing enough here to address the problem.
Well, and we did a lot to start the problem too. We pushed crack through the Black communities in the 80s. We got people hooked on pharmaceuticals through car accidents and whatever else, hooked on opiates, especially during like the 2003 really to like 2012 era. We introduced this culture into America. Our own government did this. Right. And I don't think that you can probably say the same about the Chinese.
I don't know if I can blame our government for the private market introducing opiates onto people.
No, but pharmaceutical companies are the structure of America.
But at the same time, what was happening in the 80s under George W. Bush, father of Jeb, my personal hero, I got to stand up for Jeb's dad here. What they did was they allowed a cartel that was already putting these drugs into the United States to continue doing what they were doing, and they basically bugged them. They put cameras in their planes, they followed them around, and then they went and arrested everybody on both sides of the drug trade that they did business with. So they did a giant sting operation where they allowed people to die, people to overdose, drugs to flow throughout our country just so they could document and then arrest later the people doing it. So all that already existed prior to our CIA doing that. The CIA just allowed it to happen under their watch so they could do a giant sting operation. So I kind of wanted just to push back on that a little bit, that the government didn't introduce it. All those things still existed. It's not like the CIA didn't actually invent crack cocaine. That was just something you hear on the internet. Like, that was actually something that was around for years.
Something that was justified by Ted Gunderson, like in open forum, but whatever.
Yeah, no, there's actually significant evidence we did invent it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence we did. There's tons of books about this, dude.
Freebase is essentially crack, and that's been around for 100 years before any.
But freebasing it and making cheap crack cocaine with baking soda was something that was innovated by drug lords. Freeway Ricky Ross, who was flooded most of his Freeway. I understand the difference. I've enjoyed both, but Freeway Ricky Ross, the guy who basically like proliferated the crack trade in LA, his main hookup for his coke was the Contras and the Contra networks established by the CIA. And there's like a clear correlation between the spread of crack and our interference in Nicaragua. It's like undeniable.
There is, and I'm saying that's what it is. We didn't invent crack cocaine. And I'm looking right now. there's no evidence that crack cocaine existed in other countries prior to the United States and came here in the 80s. We might have been a hand, again, the government tapped into drug networks that already existed and turned them snitches, essentially. So, like, we didn't create that. It was already there. We arrested those people, flipped them, and then used them to arrest more people, essentially. It wasn't good. I'm not defending it or anything. I'm just saying it wasn't the government that introduced that. Crack came about beforehand.
So,
Okay,
sure,
they're
they
the
didn't.
ones that popularized it and didn't
Right.
stop it.
The name you
Well,
guys
that's
want
the
to
one
look
too.
into, if you're interested in this, the guy's name was Freeway Rick Ross, or Freeway Ricky. He's the guy who basically popularized crack cocaine. So they may have not literally invented it in like a government lab, but the guy who figured out, the best way to mass market this stuff was given the cocaine by the CIA, is the point. And had we not done that to help out the Contras, none of that spread of crack would have happened in the 80s the way that it did.
Is that where he got his name? The rapper?
I believe so. I actually don't know. I believe so.
The rapper that was in Rockaware and shit, yeah. Rockefeller, yeah, that's where he got his name from.
This guy, bro. Going off top. Yeah, I mean, so what do we do here then? What is the solution? I mean, I've seen some people legalize everything, but then y'all brought up the point about sex trafficking being a bigger problem. I don't see the cartels changing. I've seen recent interviews saying that they will retaliate, but they're also like they respect Trump. They think he's trying to do what's best for his people. But they're they're not exactly happy with what they've got. They're always looking to expand. Like, what do we do here then?
Criminalize homelessness and then forced mandatory rehab. Jason Neely, I think his name was, the one that Daniel Penny choked out on the train. He was in a rehab in New York State that was voluntary to leave. He checked out the next day and left when he was instituted into rehab after committing crime. Mandatory
rehabs are voluntary. All rehabs are voluntary. You can be court mandated to one, but the staff. I work at a rehab. The staff is never going to force you to stay in the building physically.
That's what I want.
But yeah, well, so what you're saying is to jail people. And listen, I think, okay, like I live on Long Island, right? We used to have Pilgrim State. We used to have Kings Park Psych Center. We had these massive inpatient psych units. My fiance works at Pilgrim, actually, or worked at Pilgrim, sorry. So when they closed these places or downsized them, there's like a direct correlation between those things closing and homelessness like spiking and being completely out of control. Ironically, both campuses are home to many homeless people because the state government has done nothing with the property. So it's just a bunch of homeless people laying around smoking crack in empty buildings. If we just spent the money, and I know that you're saying like, oh, Trump signed an executive order. Look, it's going to be like a multi-phase, comprehensive, multi-billion-dollar project. I don't think the federal government is going to commit those kinds of resources to drug addiction. They just don't care enough. They feel like that's a poor person problem. They don't give a shit if a crackhead attacks you or attacks me or, whatever, like someone ODs in the subway, because the people who run our government are high-powered, wealthy elites. They don't ride the subway. They don't give a fuck. So, we're going to need, at some point, something has to give. We're going to have to address it that way. But until we do, look, we could annihilate all of Mexico, guys. There's still going to be drug cartels. There's still going to be drugs flowing into America somehow. People will produce drugs here. So it's about addressing the real problem, in my view. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I would say
again, I agree with that.
I was just gonna say it's a money problem in both ways, right? You have to limit money coming in, and you have to, use the money and the government has to build resources for these people here domestically. So I think it's a twofold. And to Trump's point that he's already done with tariffs and threatened countries with sanctions, you can do the same still. I'm still in support of doing that if you want to action it that way and sanction countries or tariff them and use that to limit flow of drugs or penalize the governments themselves. But also to your point, you have to start building these resources in, and that takes years and years. So it's not even just Trump. It's going to be the next Republican president or the next Democratic president to keep those funds coming in, because otherwise then they close down. These places close down like you've seen, and you can't build enough for people to use, and then it just becomes everybody else's problem. So it's twofold in that way. You need to spend money. You need to find a way to get people. I mean, I know it's something that voters don't like to deal with, but again, politicians don't think about it first. But I think if enough people speak out about it, it's like, would you rather have less homeless people in your neighborhood or more? I think this is something that people need to have their voices heard more out. And when we go to the polling booths, I don't think that's a big enough problem. Every election that people are talking about, honestly. I mean, people do talk about it, but just like not clearly enough.
It's not a top 10 issue, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, so what do we see any real change happening? Because it doesn't look like legal. It seems like legalization is hitting snags left and right. I mean, Trump seems to be somewhat pro legalization of marijuana. I mean, does that fix the real problem? We mentioned like the culture. Mexico has like a very big corruption culture. Here in America, I would argue that there's nothing more American than railing a line of cocaine, doing push-ups on a boat, and fucking a hot slut. I don't know what's more American than that. So whenever y'all are telling me we're going to change the culture, I don't see that happening here. If y'all remember Dare, it just taught us how to find more drugs. I don't know that like how do you change a culture here like in another country in regards to this if we're gonna not even able to do it here? What is the solution then?
That's true. Dare was like a checklist of all the drugs I was going to try when I got older. That's what it taught me.
Still haven't got to peyote yet, unfortunately.
It's terrible. You're gonna be sick for 3 days.
Oh, I'm good then.
I mean, well, sorry, I'll be quick.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm talking a lot, but just look. How do you change the culture? It's very difficult. As a Marxist, I got to say that all this stuff is downstream from material conditions, right? So why do people feel hopeless? Well, they feel hopeless because economic inequality, there's like a glass ceiling for most people. There's no room to build a sustainable existence on your own anymore, price of houses, blah, blah, blah. You guys know all of this stuff. I think that actually the whole MAGA idea of bringing manufacturing back to America at its core is a good idea. It's just, the way that we're trying to do it with like heavy tariffs and pressuring businesses to open up factories here, I don't think that's going to work out because the goods that Americans will produce will be enormously expensive, and that'll hurt consumers, thus compounding the whole economic inequality problem. So I think one idea would be mass infrastructure projects and giving people jobs as a result of that, right? So, I don't know. Again, I live in New York. I look at New York City. The infrastructure is decaying and falling apart. You could employ lots and lots and lots of people to help rebuild that, right? Now, it's a huge investment. It requires a lot of money, right, at the state level, or, if the federal government helped us out, that'd be great too. But if you gave young people a sense of purpose and they're rebuilding their city and they're, I think those things, even though it sounds unrelated, that actually has a huge impact on someone's life, and it makes them less likely to fall down this path of hopelessness and despair. I don't know why I'm here. I got to stick a needle in my arm to feel something, blah, blah, blah.
I got a degree, a good job. The only thing stopping me from continuing to do drugs is I got married.
Yeah, well, that helps too. Yeah.
I do think that there's already evidence that the culture's changing. Gen Z is drinking like at a less rate than any generation before them. I think culture is changing on its own.
Hold on, JD. Hold on. Let's just examine that claim. The claims I've seen is they're drinking much less than the millennials. Okay.
The generation before them. That's what I said.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Now that seems well and good on its own, but how would you drink more than millennials? Like, the only way you're drinking more
but
than
don't you think it's even more responsible drinking? I'm just that cusp of Gen X and millennial, and we were drinking like the cheapest shit we could find. We weren't drinking like brew house beers or anything like that, fine IPAs and shit. Like, don't you think that the drinking culture has already changed on its own?
No.
We were drinking bottles of Korsky until we passed out. Plastic bottles.
No, when I go to the club, like I actually just bitched about this earlier today. Like, okay, so I've like stopped hanging out with a lot of people because when I go to the club, there's a couple crowds. There's like, there's the business people crowd. There's the, we're like the young people. There's whatever, and then you go to like the dance club, right? So I'm at the discotheque, and you'll see all the guys, I'm like 34, and you'll see all these guys 34 or older. They're like 35, 40, 50. And then you'll see these girls, and it's always new girls, and they're always just turned 21 or 19, and they're all getting hammered. And then you see the guys following those girls around that are like their age. And I'm like, no, they're just not drinking as much as we are yet. Like, I don't see any change in the culture. Like, even the guys that are like, oh, we're conservative red pill guys, they're drinking. I don't think there is really a change. I mean, what evidence do y'all have that there is a change? Maybe they're drinking less. I just don't think they've had the opportunity or developed that culture yet. I
don't think they can afford to, and it's going to stick with them.
I mean, to be honest, I think it's mostly just video games. Yeah, they're staying home and playing video games. Yeah.
They can't afford to.
It's cheap, it's fun, and it's easy, and it doesn't make you have a horrible hangover the next day.
I had money falling out of my pockets when I was saying fucking Obama ruining the economy. I was going to the bar, spending $400 it was nuts, talking about how bad the economy back then when it absolutely was not in comparison. Like, it's expensive now.
Yeah. I will say, going back to the talk about how we solved the problem, as a Georgist, it has nothing to do with it. I just want to say, because the other guy said a Marxist. But as a liberal, I mean, yeah, I am pretty fond of the idea of forced rehab, decriminalizing drug use, and I believe in Switzerland and in Portugal, sometimes doctors can even prescribe certain hard drugs in order to help wean you off. And that prescription can sometimes last for years if you're really struggling to get off. So that oftentimes just destroys the income of the drug trade and makes those black markets significantly smaller, because suddenly the volume of drugs passing through those black markets is way, way, way smaller, because you can just go get a fucking prescription if you're seriously addicted, right?
But dude, we have that now with methadone and Suboxone. I mean, so I work in a methadone clinic, and the way methadone works is if you're addicted to opioids, you take methadone and then you're not sick anymore. And in theory, then you can wean off the methadone and you're A-okay. And what ends up happening is the people who get their methadone then get their dose, then they go shoot dope in the parking lot or smoke crack in the parking lot. It's not really a solution. Drug replacement therapy, listen, it's harm reduction, which can help. I'm not saying it's not part of a solution, but we already implement something like that here. I just want to be clear.
And methadone is great, by the way.
Zoomers, by the way, guys, they might not be drinking, but they're fucking taking edibles and vaping. I work with teenage drug addicts. They take mushroom chocolates and I don't know, and they watch AI porn. Like, that's what they're doing. They're not out drinking, no, and the numbers might be lower. And that trend could very well continue because everybody's becoming like a depressed, weird shut-in. But people are still doing drugs.
I agree. AI porn is a problem. We should go back to regular porn.
But the culture thing remains the same. People feel hopeless, whether it's a hopeless drunk, a hopeless crackhead, a hopeless edible eating, AI porn watching, video game addicted Zoomer. It's all the same thing. We got to resolve that somehow, right?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I actually do agree with you that anti-poor programs would go a very, very long way. I mean, I think also one of the other reasons that these drug control programs are so successful in Europe is because they have very large social safety nets. And that makes it a lot easier for people to get off drugs and just do something else with their lives. Obviously, it doesn't always work because there could be serious psychological problems that aren't resolved by money, which is why it's nice to have rehab or psychiatrists in your country. But yeah, just to be clear, I'm not in disagreement. I just wanted to point out that there are countries which have seriously curtailed their drug trade, and even countries which don't have super strong social safety nets like Switzerland, just by forced rehab and the drug replacement therapy on a greater scale than we have today.
I want to stand up for drug replacement therapy, not because everything you said is correct, but because of the way Suboxone works. I've sniffed Suboxone. It tastes like oranges. It's fucking disgusting. But Suboxone, after you do it eventually enough, it builds up some sort of chemical balance in your system. The next time you do an opiate, it doesn't affect you nearly as much, if at all. And that would almost ruin the high for somebody. That, to me, is a great advancement in science, medical science.
You still have to have the want to wean yourself off of Suboxone too, because I know plenty of people that abuse that shit too.
I have a friend who was on it for 3 years. I was on it for 6 months, and when I came off,
I was on it for about 6 months too. Took my tooth.
And look, it's not this. dude, all of this stuff can be part of the solution. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It can all be part of the solution. It's just, I guess what I'm getting at is like we open this conversation with like, should we invade Mexico to take out the cartel? And it's like, hold on, like, you know, like we didn't even touch on my first point of like how realistic this is. Like, guys,
that's a good point.
You do understand the flow of weapons to Ukraine and the flow of weapons to Israel and the money to those places and lots of other little places we really don't talk about is such that we don't really have the luxury. I'm not saying that we don't have the ability to defend ourselves or whatever, but we don't have the luxury of committing vast amounts of resources to a concentrated, highly sophisticated military strike in Mexico such that it would like totally degrade their capabilities in 2 weeks. You know, I mean, dude, if it's that classic thing, like I had a debate with Gibbs on a panel, I think it was like over a year ago, and it was about Iran and invading Iran and all this stuff. And Gibbs is very like pro, like, you know, interventionism, or was at the time. And my thing was like, dude, they've wanted to crush Iran for like 2 decades. If it was that easy, they would just do it. You know, if it was that easy to take out the cartel, they would just do it. They wouldn't be sitting here talking about it. You know, it's obviously more complicated than that. And so we go back to, this is probably more of a negotiating tactic by Trump than anything, which is standard shit with him. He was talking about nuking fucking North Korea. Do you think he was really going to do that? You know, but anything to get, you know, Kim to the negotiating table, anything to get, you know, Khomeini to say he will, I don't know, do this and that and the other reform, and so that we don't have to go to war with Iran, you know, like, Trump's strategy is talk big and then negotiate a solution, you know, underneath the table. That's what I think he's trying to do here with the president of Mexico. I could be wrong, but that's how I see it.
I think you make an interesting analogy there with the Iran situation, right? Like I recently said the person that's the most vindicated now is President Bush, right, with the Iraq War. Like everything is now worked out perfectly. Iraq is gone, Libya is gone, Syria is gone. We have all our major enemies in the region are basically, you know, Hamas is falling apart, Hezbollah is being kicked out of their government, Iran is in shambles, they don't have a nuclear program, or they have a much smaller one, they don't have any air defenses now, you know, their top generals are dead, you know, they're basically on their last legs. I mean, so, you know, maybe 20 years Bush's plan worked, or 30 years, or whatever long it took, right? And so when we're looking at Mexico, what does like it actually look like? You know, say these are, you know, full invasion and then, you know, take 2 weeks to take them out. You know, I actually don't disagree. I think it would take 2 weeks to conquer Mexico. I think that it would turn into a much different quagmire afterwards, right? Like there's going to be the like resistance kind of thing that lasts indefinitely from these cartels and these groups and all these different little villages that are basically supported by the cartels. I think that that's much more going to be much more akin to Afghanistan, where they disappear into the jungle or, you know, the caves or the ruins or whatever, and or the cities themselves. So I like, what does it look like if we invade? I've seen Mexico's president say, yeah, you know, we would like your help, but on your side of the border, and then, you know, you're going to provide us intelligence. What would like an actual, what does this like idea of Trump's of invading Mexico actually look like on paper? I don't think he's actually talking about sending in the U.S. Marines down to, you know, Nuevo Laredo, but you know, is it Predator drones? Is it?
I mean, that's
satellites?
what he said though. It was very clear all the way back to 2022. His messaging was war on the cartel. Like, so, you know, interpret that however you want. That might be rhetoric, whatever. But this is one point that stayed the same the entire time, and he's been saying for 3 years now. So that's my only point, like what I see in the difference in some of this other stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
want
have
to give
so
up
many
credit to
issues.
non-smoker here. Like Tyler gave you a hard time last panel. It was like, oh, where's the attack on from Iran, right? Like, and sure, I'll agree with there's been no attack from Iran. However, if you attack the cartels, I guarantee there will be an attack within a couple hours, like here in the United States. Like, I think that there's it's a totally different animal than like Iran, who's got an ocean between us, you know, and the cartels who are already here. Like, I think that's a much different, like, than an Iranian sleeper cell.
An oil-rich nation with 90 million people versus a group of 140,000 that aren't even working together or coordinated.
Well, it's a weird okay, because like with Iran, I mean, like, so I have a lot of disagreements with everything you said about Iran, Iraq, Libya, all of that stuff. Like, there's so many flaws in that I don't even know where to start.
Well, we don't need to dive in.
Yeah, but let's avoid that. Like, to simplify here, like in terms of the capability of reprisal with Iran, the risk of Iran attacking the U.S., the mainland U.S., is like nil. But the real risk Iran presents to us is taking out our bases in the Middle East. And I know you guys have this like very odd like overconfidence that there's just no way they could do that. And the U.S. does not share your confidence in that, which is exactly why when Trump carried out the attacks on the Iranian nuclear facilities, he immediately approached Israel and said, we have to negotiate an immediate ceasefire now. And in such that, you know, it's not to say I think that Trump thought Iran would kill all U.S. military personnel or whatever, but it's not a simple thing with Iran. We would be pulled into a protracted conflict where we would have to eventually put boots on the ground. And by the way, I mean, for everybody, Tyler, who was saying like, oh, it's so ridiculous that the war is clearly over, it'll never happen again. There was like just an article in Foreign Policy yesterday that like there's a coming conflict between Israel and Iran and like possibly as soon as September. It's not a guaranteed thing, but, you know, look, the objective here was regime change. We didn't achieve that. The Israelis didn't achieve that. So what's the goal in the region long term? Regime change. How do you do that? Military intervention. Now, the cartel is not a regime. You know, they're a loose affiliated network of these little cells that operate, you know, in these like clandestine little, I don't know, regions. And they you know, it's very like shadowy networks. And you know, honestly, if you wanted to fight the cartel, a winning strategy would actually be, I think, protracted intelligence gathering and sabotage operations like that. It might be a lot more effective to do that than bomb them. You know, I mean, look at Somalia and Mogadishu and the Black Hawk Down thing. That was like a military organization or terrorist I forget, paramilitary organization that we wanted to eliminate. We sent in special forces. We sent in, you know, we tried to do a surgical military attack to take out this one commander. They shot down our helicopters. It was a fucking disaster. You know, we failed in our objective. I don't know. It's just like, you guys got to understand, like, I'm not trying to be condescending, but like, it's not like we just strike a bunch of missiles on a building and then that's it. You know, like it's complicated. You know what I mean?
I'm talking about like things we've already done, like a 60 target coordinated strike all within 30 minutes of each other, where we hit all of these facilities that manufacture drugs or warehouse weapons and things of that nature. Like, you don't have to kill them all. You're just going to cripple them so that their government can have a manageable foothold.
Tyler, if it's that simple, why do you think the U.S. government has never tried that before?
Because we benefit from them, and we benefit from it. We benefit from
the
it.
cartels?
Yes, absolutely we do. The FBI sets up the raids, and they stop the little guy here and there, and they can say, look, I brought this home, and they're not doing anything about the operation at large, but they've secured their promotion. This is like, obviously, what the hell's happening here.
Also, at least since 1992, I can see ties from the cartel to the person that was the president of Mexico at the time. Several in a row all have significant ties to the cartel. The last guy that just endorsed Scheinbaum as he left office took millions of dollars in cartel money for campaigning.
Right.
So, like, if there
but that's the point. So if we know that, I was going to mention that when you said, well, the Mexican government wouldn't allow it. Well, if we know the Mexican government is highly corrupt, you know, they're incapable of dealing with the problem at best, at worst, they're participating in it. You know, why should we pay attention to what they say at all? If it's that easy to just hit these facilities and do it really quick, why don't we just do it? You know, I mean, like, why hadn't we done it?
It's not like the Mexican government.
Hell yeah.
Why do you guys think that Donald Trump is the only one forwarding that as a realistic strategy? Do you think that it's just his strategic genius? Like, he's just thought of this in a stroke of brilliance. Nobody ever considered it before? Or is it that he's like fighting the deep state that really wants to spread drugs in America? Is that really what you think? Because honestly, I mean, like, Trump is the deep state. I hate to break it to you guys. He's part of the deep state just as much as any of these other people. Look at the fucking Epstein fiasco. You know, he has no interest in resolving, I think, a lot of these problems. And worse yet, I don't think he has a real conception of the magnitude of any of the problems. You know, he's derped his way into most of these scenarios. And really, the only one that ever worked out in his favor was North Korea. But the first trade war with China, disaster. The ending the war in Ukraine hasn't happened. Settling the stuff in the Middle East, disaster. It's still ongoing. So why do you have faith that he suddenly has the solution that no one else thought of in Mexico?
Well, it's not that no one else thought of it. This has been suggested over and over. It's more the person with the balls to do it. That's kind of what I went into with my introduction is like, in the Middle East, there was conflict since Trump's been in office. What is it? 9 nations now have signed on to the Abraham Accords. And these are nations that were all calling for the death and ending of Israel. Have now normalized trade and travel with Israel in just a few years. You can't say all the fighting's not done in the Middle East, absolutely, but you can't say there wasn't progress made on that front, absolutely. And the same thing with the tariffs. Like all these, like China's been breaking U.S. trade deals for decades with us, and nobody's done anything about it. When the first trade war happened, what the result was actually USMCA, which was to repel Chinese steel that was flooding markets from Canada and Mexico that was being pushed into the United States with the low trade rates and flooding our markets. So USMCA actually helped prevent that. That was a massive win for U.S. steel. China found loopholes to it, absolutely, and Joe Biden also lowered a lot of those metal tariffs against them for other concessions. But during that time, we actually got a nice bump in U.S. steel and pushed China out of those markets to some degree. On top of that, like with the border, Trump solved the border crisis with no new funding, no new legislation, things of that nature. It's more about him having the audacity to do
Hold on. You really think he solved the border crisis? There's no crisis of immigration at the border?
Zero.
Greg Abbott did it.
Yeah, 2 months back to back, there are 0 undocumented migrants that have been released into the United States.
Bit of a small sample size.
I mean, that's the entire border, though. 0.
But the time frame.
Yeah, 2 months is. It could go. You're right.
Look, I mean, I'm just saying, and like I don't even mean to get into the stupid left-right dichotomy of like, is Trump better than Biden? Is better? Because my point is like. You mentioned the Abraham Accords. I don't look at that as some great strategic victory for the United States on the world stage. I think that that's a win for Israel, and Trump is in the pocket of Israel, right? And I think that that's a huge benefit to Israel primarily, and not really to the United States. It's the reason the Trump administration supports a policy in the Middle East where Israel becomes a hegemonic power is so that we can actually leave the Middle East to then pivot fully towards China for a war, possibly with China, that we're going to provoke, which I'm totally against. And I don't understand the anti-interventionists who are for that.
Wait, are you saying you don't think the border has been secured? Is that kind of the point you're making just a few seconds ago?
I think it's an exaggeration to say it's been secured. Yeah, I mean, if you want to.
You don't think that, like, whenever we've had a 92% decrease since June of last year, a 97% decrease since July of 2022, or 96 since 2022, 97 since 2023, like places like Shelby Park where they had 1,500 a day and now they've had 3 in the last week, like on average, is it like?
But what about the deportations? In terms of immigration policy, I think it goes beyond just people coming over the border. But I think the border is a big deal, and if you want to count that as a win in the win column for now, yes. It's like, how long does that stick? How long is that really a secure thing?
I think to your point, it's like the next Dem can come in, and then guess what? The border numbers can get worse. So you need a long-lasting policy. That's why it's not. You can't say it's secure long term. Maybe it's secure now, but we don't know what the long term.
Hold on. So I mean, that's interesting because Greg Abbott fought Biden on this, right? And then I guess it's they fought it, they secured it, and then Biden eventually kind of just backed off, right? Like let Texas was like, all right, Texas is going to do their thing. I mean. Yeah, I would agree with you if we don't have a long-term thing. Yeah, I also agree that, the immigration, deportation policy is a kind of thing. But I kind of made this analogy on another panel, right? If you have a boat and there's a hole in it and water's coming in, what's the best way to fix it? If you only have 2 options. One, you have a giant bucket and you can dump the water out, but you can't fix the hole. The other is you can fix the hole, but you only get a cup and you can dump the water out with the cup. Which one's better? Obviously, putting the hole and getting it fixed and then using the cup is going to be better than, hey, let me just dump this out while the water rushes in, right? Like, wouldn't you agree with that?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about that. Maybe, yeah.
That was literally our conversation.
I just when I'm seeing these things, like I don't know, obviously reform is needed with immigration, but I don't know, like the security issue is kind of worrisome to me if we did invade Mexico to fight the cartels, because I think there is a regional difference. I don't know that it's fair to compare to Afghanistan, because when we look at Afghanistan, it's a world away with a culture that's totally different. John McCain said it would take us 100 years to change the culture, right? Unlike Mexico, which has a very similar culture, like to southern states in the United States, like Texas has a Spanish history, has a Mexican history. California, same thing. All these other states. And then when we look at Mexico, I don't see how we couldn't integrate that, right? And then I look and I say, oh, okay, this is regionally different because these people are already in our side. Like, they're already on our side of the border. Like, if we are actually, as Republicans, going to believe that Abrego Garcia was a cartel member and was the coyote side for the cartel on our side, then we're already admitting they have the ability to strike us in the U.S. Like, and not just on the border, but like deep up north, right? Like.
If they can go all the way to Canada, I mean, fuck yeah. I mean, that's what I was saying earlier. You basically, if you're invading and you piss off the Mexican people sufficiently, you are going to have car bombs in DC. It will just happen. I mean, they may not have they might not be able to deploy Stinger missiles or something, but absolutely, they could like do terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, probably to a scale that most people and organizations could not.
I agree, and that's like exactly why we need to take action now, because it's only going to become more sophisticated and more organized.
Well, has it over the last couple of years? I feel like the cartels have been somewhat stagnant over like the last 20 years. Not saying that they've like gotten way worse, but for the most part, it seems like the problem hasn't been as bad as it was in the 90s. At least as I remember. They
killed like 260 politicians in the last round.
Just to be clear, I'm just talking about trajectory. I'm not saying that it's not bad.
I mean, they're emboldened enough to do stuff like this now.
But you were saying it would get worse, and I was disagreeing. I was saying I don't think it is actively getting worse as far as I know, but I might be wrong. Or I at least from what I've read, it seems like it was kind of stabilizing, but it's not necessarily getting better. But also, it could get significantly better. I mean, it's not hard for countries to just change around. El Salvador just did it in like a couple of months. And I'm not saying El Salvador did it well, but after all, like, why can't Mexico one day have an El Salvador? El Salvador was in a similar position to Mexico for decades.
I think the more likelihood is they get an El Salvador, but it's a cartel-backed El Salvador guy. Like, I think
that'd be interesting.
That'd be kind of the more likelihood. I do want to go back to something.
That'd be depressing.
I want to go back to something non-smoker said, which was interesting when I brought up the China and Iran having stuff with the cartels, right? How likelihood is this actually a ploy just to get him to be able to be tougher on Iran and China if he goes in there and he goes, look, our special forces and CIA and FBI have found Chinese direct influence using to kill American citizens. This is documentation or whatever it is they find. We found the fucking, I don't know, G list or whatever. Like, are we gonna be like, oh, now we need to go fight Iran on their soil because we found ties to the Ayatollah in Mexico, or do we need to fight China? Is this like the long-term game? I mean, because I definitely think he doesn't like either of those two countries more than almost anybody. Or is that what we're going for? How likely do you see that as a probability?
To be honest, I don't think Trump has that kind of long-term planning type of mind. I don't.
It's not just Trump. I mean, there's a lot of people in the Trump administration that their primary objective is a war with China. I mean, look into Elbridge Colby, right? Bridge. Like, he's the Undersecretary of Defense, I think it is, or for policy. His entire career has been working in think tanks or founding think tanks, which articulate a grand strategy vision for the United States to confront China. We've been funding military exercises in the Pacific. We've been pressuring the Japanese and the Australians to spend more money on offensive military capabilities. I mean, like, everything that they do comes back to that. So to Gibbs's point, I mean, like, again, I don't think this is realistic, but if you told me that that was the reason, I would believe that more than anything else. That, like, yeah, this is an attempt to implicate China or Iran, really China, in some sort of international drug smuggling thing, and that would give us, a reason then to, I don't know, carry out X, Y, and Z military action in the Pacific. I would believe that sooner than I'd believe that Trump just genuinely wants to end the drug problem in America. I just don't buy that.
Well, to be honest, though, I don't really think Why would he need to invade Mexico though to justify that casus belli? It just doesn't seem necessary.
He
Could
wouldn't.
still make the same claim.
Well,
is like my point.
right now,
It's
the
a reach.
25% tariff against
Okay.
China for fentanyl is currently halted, while the administration said they're in negotiations right now with the Chinese government to work on a two-front attack to stop the trafficking of fentanyl. They're saying the government isn't actually involved in it and is going to work with them to stop more fentanyl from going out of their country. So that is something that's in the air right now. The tariff is currently suspended. China is currently working with the U.S. supposedly right now on fentanyl. So I don't know how much you want to take that as truth, but that's what both sides are currently saying.
Well, I don't know if you can trust China that much.
But that's the thing. I don't buy that China has like a vested interest in spreading drug addiction in America. We have a pretty healthy drug problem without the Chinese having to do a fucking thing about it. We are a massive market for drugs regardless. So I believe China, China's in an interesting position because they know that there are a lot of people in the Trump administration that want a war with China. There's saber rattling and brinksmanship all the time over Taiwan with Biden also. I think the Chinese feel like they want to reduce tensions. They don't want a war with the United States. They view it as something that would be certainly catastrophic for them more than anyone else and could potentially be a nuclear war. So they feel like, let's do what we have to do to reduce tensions. Let's, agree that we'll cut down on X, Y, and Z export or whatever. That may be a precursor for fentanyl. They're willing to work with us on that issue. What I'm trying to, I guess, say is that, first of all, make no mistake about it, that like all of these foreign policy moves, there's a bigger picture here. And the bigger picture for a lot of people in the Trump administration is we got to confront China. Right, because China is a growing economic threat. They're a growing military threat. They're a super regional power that we can't just marginalize through, these little actions. Or they don't even view China like they do Russia. They view China as a serious, serious threat to our unipolar hegemonic power. And so the only way to resolve that is to weaken them through possibly a confrontation. And everything comes back to that, in my opinion.
I would push back just a little on that, and I'm not the biggest fan of Trump myself, but I think if you look at his history, and we've talked about it a little bit already, outside of arming Israel, and I think you could even argue that Trump could be getting sick of arming Israel in the near future, but we really haven't done anything to prolong or like get ourselves fully involved with war, whether it's Ukraine or threatening North Korea or in the Middle East now, where things have shifted in terms of who most of Americans are starting to shift their support away from Israel. And I don't think Trump is really interested in starting war. Now, he could be gone in 3 years and J.D. Vance could become president. I think he's probably a bit different in where his thinking is, but I don't really trust or think Trump would want to get us involved in a large-scale war with China. Whether I agree there are people in the administration that definitely do, but I think that the way Trump thinks of war, and especially with nuclear powers, he's genuinely afraid of getting involved with them. Russia, China, North Korea, all of these players who have nuclear capabilities, he's threatened in other ways without making it, boots on the ground. And so I think that China could be an issue, but with Trump in office, I'm not sure if he ever gets there. And I think similarly with Mexico, that's also a reason why I don't think he would ever put boots on the ground in Mexico or actually invade Mexico. That's actually one of my points that I wanted to make earlier, is that I don't think he's really interested in getting into a war, which he promised he would never do as president.
I mean, to be fair, he often contradicts his promises. But
well, how likely do you think it would, if he's not going to do a war with Mexico directly, would it be that he would put like special operations troops into Mexico, like plausible deniability or drone strikes? Like, how likely is something that?
Yeah, I mean,
drone
why not?
strikes are possible. I mean, I think, but why haven't we done that already? And why haven't we done the same in Israel already, or have your troops in Israel? I mean, again, we arm them. I get it, but similarly with Ukraine, it's like very small scale compared to what the possibilities and our resources are capable of. Like, we really haven't gotten to that point yet where the U.S. can really get involved a lot more.
Well, you mentioned why haven't we done that with Israel? Wouldn't you agree that like there's a big difference between Israel and Palestine, which is the world away, and hey, our backyard. Wouldn't it behoove us to
You
be
could argue
more?
Israel's a bigger ally than Mexico to us, so that's probably
Sure.
Probably,
why
yeah.
we've gotten more involved.
Dude, I'm a little confused, I think, by what you're arguing. Are you saying that America hasn't engaged in any kind of military confrontations with other countries under Trump or Biden or all of them, or what do you mean?
I'm saying to the point of what you would consider an invasion or boots on the ground. We
Well, they
haven't,
can't
and
do
we
that.
never would.
Well, we
The argument about
wouldn't put-
Mexico would be right or no?
No, yeah. Well, I think some of the people here suggested that might be a possibility. I was misunderstanding. Sorry, because I was also reading something else. But what I thought you were trying to say is like whether you look at the Ukraine-Russia war or you look at Israel's conflicts. Given that we haven't put boots on the ground there, it's a sign that we're never going to put boots on the ground in the near future. And I would dispute that on multiple grounds. I mean, like, first of all, we haven't put boots on the ground in Gaza because the Israelis have completely decimated Gaza. I mean, 90% of the infrastructure is destroyed. Hamas is totally degraded. They wiped out Hezbollah. They killed all their leadership. It hasn't been necessary at all in the Middle East. Iran remains to be seen, and that's absolutely a possibility because regime change might come down to boots on the ground, and the Israelis are not capable of doing such a feat on their own. But Russia and Ukraine, the reason there's no boots on the ground there is the obvious. It's the threat of nuclear war. So, but in terms of like there being no risk, I mean, like, so you guys should know that the U.S. and the Philippines, they do a joint military exercise. I think it's annually. It's called the Bali Katan exercise. This past year, they specifically prepared for a ground war incursion with the Chinese. That was the nature of the exercise between the Philippine military and the U.S. military. We've been doing unprecedented, in terms of scale, exercises in the Pacific, rallying both the Australian and the Japanese Air Force with our Air Force as a show of strength to intimidate who? It's about preparing for a likely war with China. And I'm not saying it's 100% going to happen, but there are a lot of people who are really driving at that. They want that to happen. They're pushing a confrontation over Taiwan, saying, well, what if China invades Taiwan? China has no interest in invading Taiwan. It's never going to happen unless we provoke them into doing it. And
do you remember John Bolton in Trump's administration, extreme pro-war hawk, who was fired by Trump at one point because I don't think Trump really wants to believe these folks. And like I agree with you and what you said so far, like the training exercises, the people in his administration. But at the end of the day, you have to convince Trump, and I think he's the toughest person in the room to convince for a full-scale war like that.
Trump just denied, like 2 weeks ago, Taiwan's president permission to stop in New York during a planned visit to Latin America because China asked him to. So I would say that our ties with Taiwan, Hegseth did say we would go to war with China if they invaded Taiwan, but the Trump administration term 2 has not been very friendly to Taiwan. They issued tariffs on them specifically for chips to get Taiwanese manufacturers over here producing those chips and to give our chips here a step up to try to catch up to them. So term 2 Trump has not been that friendly.
Also, I'm going to say this again. Trump himself said since 2022, war with the cartels. It hasn't been a platform for war with China. I agree with you. There's definitely things going on behind the scenes, but you're not going to find a lot of surprise from supporters if something like this does go through, because this is something that he has been talking about and using the word war, which he doesn't use lightly.
Well, to Tyler, to your point, though, sure, but you just mentioned we're in negotiation with China, right? And that's the active, ongoing negotiation due to the tariffs. However, on the flip side, since Trump's came in office, I know he's made a new arms sale deal with Taiwan. I think approximately $18 billion. Which includes upgrades to Taiwan's F-16 fleet. They got other systems and ships. We've sent more ships for freedom of navigation passage. I know that we've had more high-level meetings, and I think this is the really big one. Is he declassified the memos on the 6 assurances, which basically lay out exactly what U.S. policy is on Taiwan, right, as opposed to the strategic ambiguity that we have been doing. Like, what I mean, I think there's one thing to be said for, like, yeah, you denied the president in New York, but whenever you're doing all these other things, it's like, yeah, okay, we're mid negotiation. It's going to be a bad look to have the Taiwanese president in New York versus, oh,
we're also in negotiation with them though too, with Taiwan. So that might also be a motivating factor as well. But just the fact is that China said this was a sneaky visit and that he shouldn't come, and the Trump administration agreed with him and denied him a travel visa. That, to me, tells you that they're kind of working with China to some degree, and it isn't just a plan to invade them. They really do want the trade resolution to be what Trump said in 2022 in his campaign promise. Like, we're going to slap tariffs on people in order to get free trade as the end result. So I do think they want that deal more than anything.
To be entirely honest, I do believe Trump is capable of going to war with Mexico. I mean, after all, getting dragged into a possible war with Iran wasn't something that he ran on, but it is ultimately something that Trump did decide to roll the dice on. Fortunately, didn't happen. Still rolled the dice, right? I disagree with the China theory of everything. I think if we were talking about a hypothetical Trump invading Mexico, my honest assessment is that just Trump is a very personalist leader, and he's always kind of made immigration and cartels a very key part of his messaging. And invading and attacking the cartels would just be furthering that messaging even more. I don't think it'd have any strategic benefits from the perspective of China war hawks, which I do know are in their administration. I don't know. That seems like a stretch. I don't think U.S. foreign policy is that consolidated yet. I think the Trump administration is just too internally fragmented.
I want to ask this: if we do go to war with Mexico, I know that we've talked about this with Iran before. At least not Smoking Tyler and I have. But balkanization, would Mexico balkanize? Mexico's a pretty strong national identity, but would the cartels like carve up their own little kingdoms? Would it become like Sinaloa break off? Like what would that look like if we invaded? Or were we actually gonna like manifest destiny them? Like is this just one step before we invade Venezuela? Like what does this look like long term here?
Well,
do we invade Venezuela with that? Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What would we call Mexico? We'd have to change it.
Yeah.
They probably just keep their state names, right?
I don't know if we would really need that kind of platform to invade Venezuela. Maybe, though. I mean, if you're just saying fuck it and just, go for it. I guess in theory, right? Why not? But balkanizing, not likely. Like you mentioned, the national identity. Big nation states balkanize when there are competing national identities. So like Yugoslavia, is the Balkans, best example. I mentioned Iran because there are lots of ethnic groups in Iran that don't feel represented by the central government there. The Baloch separatists is a great example, the Kurds, right? So there's potential for balkanization in Iran. I don't really see that in Mexico. But I don't know. Look, one last thing on the China stuff, and I'll shut the fuck up about it, I promise. But I do want to mention to all the viewers, right, who just may want to look into this, or any of you guys, does everyone remember in early July when the U.S. made the decision to stop shipping weapons to Ukraine, right? And it was a little weird because it was made because stockpiles were supposedly running low. That's what the Pentagon said. And what came out in the reports is that that decision was made by Elbridge Colby. Elbridge Colby, again, is the Undersecretary for Defense for Policy. Look into Elbridge Colby's background. He is like a career China hawk. That's basically what he made his bread and butter on. He founded a grand strategy think tank, which is all centered on figuring out a way to pivot our foreign policy towards a confrontation with China. Look at some of the statements J.D. Vance has made over the since being nominated. China is America's biggest threat. They're the biggest threat to our country. The war in Ukraine, J.D. Vance said, distracts us from shifting our focus to China. J.D. Vance says we should have an Asia-first foreign policy at the Munich Security Conference in 2024. There's a reason the Trump administration wants to pull out of Europe, right? And it's not because Trump loves Putin and there's a P-tape. It's because the Americans want the Europeans to contribute more to NATO, right, and fund their own defense so we can pull our resources out of there. They want Israel to succeed in establishing a greater Israel in the Middle East so that we can pull our resources out of there, so that we can build up our resources in the Pacific and either fight China directly in a war that we provoke, which is my prediction, or they engage us in a war that is hostile on their end and we can retaliate. Some other people think that's a possibility. Either way, I think that's where all of this is going, at least according to a lot of people in this administration. Is Trump committed to that? Full stop? I don't know. I think Trump doesn't want war, generally speaking, because he knows how unpopular it is in the U.S., but that doesn't mean he can avoid it, certainly. And invading Mexico, I don't know, guys. It's like, it's really, really out there suggestion. I hope you guys know, like, it's like a very, very, very unlikely thing.
Can I say that I agree with you on a lot of your China hypothesizing, especially the people that surround the administration, but like the base premise that you started with quite a bit ago, that China wouldn't intentionally introduce fentanyl into this country through means of ways, through the cartel themselves, whatever, with the intention of, introducing this highly addictive substance, high mortality rate, cost effective, very cheap compared to heroin, with the intention to destabilize the American worker, I think is like overlooking a major part of like what they're so pissed about.
I saw on Facebook that China invented boba tea to make Americans fat.
I believe that.
Nice. I
Well,
believe
the
it.
Japanese invented anime.
Let me just run one more what if before we get to closings here. All right, since it's a similar kind of complaint, with Tren de Agua, and we've already issued an arrest warrant for Maduro. What's more likely, invading Mexico, or invading Venezuela?
Probably invading Venezuela, to be honest.
Yeah, probably in Venezuela.
Yeah.
Venezuela is a
that,
smaller
like, gang try to
country. They have like they have a government which despises us rather than the Mexican government, which is at least somewhat cooperative. Like it's an easier target. They have a lot more to give, to be honest. I mean, Venezuela has a lot of untapped natural resources. I'm not somebody who's really huge on like the America does everything for oil theory, but it's definitely part of it, right? Like America certainly
resources.
For Trump
like
specifically,
resources.
yeah. Trump is that.
Yeah, that actually is true. Trump
he does
personally
like oil.
might be the America for
Take
oil
the
guy.
oil.
Yeah, so I could see that more plausibly, and I mean they do have an explicitly anti-American government. Rather, again, like at least the Mexicans, Scheinbaum isn't like inherently anti-American or anything.
You get the Mexicans to pay the cartels to invade Venezuela. You take care of two birds with one stone.
There you go.
That could work. That could work.
They might
That would work. Or you could end up with an even stronger cartel that now has like fucking like military grade.
Well, they already have that. They already have the military.
Oh, I know, but we're talking.
I just when I was laughing with Tyler, was like, they don't got Stinger missiles. I was like, they literally are the military in some regards. Like
But the military in Mexico doesn't have the capability of shooting down anything 30,000 feet either. I checked that out as well. Last year they were shooting down helicopters with 50 caliber anti-low aircraft guns. If we put 30,000, 40,000 foot bombers on them, there's nothing they can do. They wouldn't even see it coming. The hits would be done before they realized what was going on, and 40 of their facilities would be up.
I mean, are you saying that we're going to send the B-52s in to take out the cartels? Like, I don't think we're going to carpet bomb the cartels, bro.
No, just regular bombers go that high as well. 40,000, 42,000 feet, things like that. You can get them up there pretty fucking high.
All right, well, let's do some closings here, because I got some things to hype up for this coming up. Tyler, go ahead. Tell us who you are, what your final thoughts are. By the way, speaking of Tyler, he's got a debate tomorrow here at the DCS Championship match. We have 2 DCS Championship matches coming up in the next 2 weeks. We got tomorrow, would Superman join ICE? And we're not talking about Dean Cain. We're talking about the comic book Superman. And then next week on Tuesday, I don't know the exact time yet, we're going to have Pisco versus Ryan McLaughlin over constitutional immunity, I believe. So it should be good. So let's go ahead, Tyler. Tell us your closing thoughts here. And
I think
anything else?
Sorry. Yeah, average debate enjoyer. I just moved to YouTube. I got up to 9 viewers. That's my cap so far since I moved over last week. So that's cool. Let's keep it going. Closing thoughts. I think we all pretty much agree the cartels are bad. They should be stopped. I heard a little bit of reverse Nirvana theory in that like they're going to be hard to fight and it's going to cause problems now. So let's kind of ignore them. But at the end of the day, I don't think we need to invade Mexico for this, and I do think there will be on the back end consent. I just don't think politicians and police there can say that they're for this because they will die. So I don't see us invading Mexico. I just see some maybe targeted hits and treating them like a giant drug terror group or whatever. Mexico proper, the main government itself, will be unaffected. I see us more likely to hit Venezuela, but at the end of the day, I think Trump is trying to redefine the American powers and what the American president is based off of conventional method. And this type of redefining is, if you're a foreign power and you're not working hard to prevent deaths in America as a result of your lacking, we're going to charge you accountable for it as well. And that's what the tariff pressure has been to Mexico this entire time. It's been about fentanyl, it's been about human trafficking, it's been about the unsecured border. And they've just been hammering them over and over with the threat of tariffs, and they've been kind of giving small concessions. This one will put the nail in the coffin, even though it won't end the tariffs. It'll probably be enough to keep them down for, I don't know, let's say 5 years. That's a win in Trump's book, because he'll be out of office by the time they're a threat again.
All right, Castle.
Cool. Yeah, for my closing, I would just say that for the argument of if the U.S. could take out, Mexican cartels with our prowess, absolutely. But the argument of should we, I still remain steadfast that we shouldn't. And for the reasons that we've all discussed today is, one, I still don't think Trump is really interested in doing that. And Trump, opposite of Teddy Roosevelt, who said, speak softly and carry a big stick, he speaks loudly and also carries a big stick. And I think that speaking loudly piece has done enough work and enough of a job to get Mexico to the table in negotiations. I don't see him changing his tone on that anytime soon, and he can continue to do that. I wanted to mention too earlier, in 2024, we did see fentanyl deaths decrease in the United States. So something may have happened, or it could have been an anomaly. But as long as we continue to see that trend go downward, I think that's a good thing. And the most we can do is really continue that and continue to spend domestically on programs that we discussed to reduce drug usage, to reduce fentanyl flow through the border with a stronger border, which I totally agree with. So there are things that we can do domestically to save ourselves from the drug epidemic, while also charging and forcing other countries to come to the table without going through any type of full-scale war or any type of invasion. That's about it. You can reach me or contact me at Castle Guard, that's CASSELL Guard YT, on Twitter or Twitch. But it was a pleasure getting to talk to all of you. It was really, really good conversation.
Well, thanks for being here. Non-smoker.
Twitch.tv/non_smoker. Check me out on x.com/non-smoker. The O's are zeros. And catch me every other week on the Struggle Session, a radio show I host out in Suffolk County, New York, 7 to 10 p.m. on Tuesdays, and on Twitch, Eastern Time. So I think this suggestion is just like absurd and improbable and laughable. And, I appreciate you guys for coming on and defending the position. I was sort of curious to hear how anyone could defend this. I think that we're all on the same page as far as the basics. Like, we have to do something domestically to tackle the drug problem. We have to do something to secure the border. And there's been success there. We have to figure out a way to maintain that. We have to do something to address homelessness, mental illness, the hopelessness the average American feels. All of those are like, the drug problem is downstream from that, and the cartel problem is downstream from that, in my view. So, I don't know. I feel like we have a different way of viewing not only the issue at hand, but really the world. And I think it's like such an impractical suggestion that I'm kind of surprised we're even really talking about it. But then again, with Trump, it's always a little zany. It's always a little wacky. It's always a little hard to predict. So who the fuck knows? Tomorrow we might see tanks rolling into Mexico City. I have no idea. But with that said, I think it's a bad idea either way. And that's all I have to say on the matter.
All right. Thank you so much. Sadie.
Yeah, I think I said everything that I needed to say. I definitely support it. I do think it's an actual threat, probably one of the only that I've seen in my lifetime to our actual homeland. Of course, you can go back to 9/11. That was a horrible event that happened on that day. But did everything that happened in the forever war that occurred justify it? No, probably not. This is not some sort of like terror event. This is an ongoing existential threat to the country. And again, I can't overlook the fact that I do believe that our own government is complicit in it. And I do believe that there's been traitorous activities that allowed this evil organization to embolden themselves and grow. I do believe that the Mexican government is also culpable. So I'm Sadie Girl 216. You can find me on X. I do an X space every weekday, 3:35 p.m. Eastern time. I'm streaming on Pentuple TV while he's on his little break. And I know he misses all you guys very much, and he will be back soon.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Shenandoah.
Yeah, so as I said at the beginning, I'm Shenandoah. My Twitch name is Shenandoah with 5 H's, and my YouTube name is Shenandoah with 3 H's and TV at the end. You can catch me on both. As I said at the start, I think this is a flat-out ridiculous idea. Invading Mexico, and especially conquering Mexico, will create such immense consequences for the United States that would probably lead to terror attacks on the streets never seen since 9/11, and probably some of the worst chaos in the Mexican state that we've seen since the 90s for basically nothing. I think in the end, the cartels would probably just return after the Americans kind of give up. I think it's a very thinly veiled excuse for imperialist action in someone else's country. We don't seem to respect anybody's sovereignty these days under Trump, and I don't trust Trump to pull it off well. So let's not do another forever war. Please don't fucking invade Mexico. Please, thank God. Please. That's my statement. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right, boys, that's it for us today here on Give Me a Break. We'll be back tomorrow with the DCS. It's going to be exciting stuff. We got more stuff going on next week to be announced. Thanks for everybody for coming. We're going to raid out, it looks like we're going to raid Rangers, and it'll be a good time. So, bye, everybody. Thank you all so much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, y'all.
Later, guys.
Take her easy.
Thanks, guys. Later.